The best herbs to grow in pots. A great way to grow herbs in small spaces or expand your herb garden in a way that is movable. For those of you who rent or don't have a garden space, planting herbs in pots is a simple and affordable option. Plus, you can plant any time of year. I'm Cian Cosell, and this is Farmhouse Teas. Today, we are planting some of the best herbs to grow in pots. Maybe you're late to gardening season this year or plumb out of space. Maybe you rent and can't have an in-ground garden, or you have physical limitations that make getting down into the garden plot difficult. No matter what time of year it is, you can plant herbs in pots and start your herb garden right now. First up, we need to talk about the best herbs to grow in pots before we dive into what types of pots we should be using and the care that these herbs are going to require. When you are planning your potted herb garden, it's important to think about what herbs you will use the most. Are they culinary herbs or medicinal herbs? Do you use those herbs often or just a little bit? We want to maximize the space we have for the containers and the pots that we are planting in. There are so many herb plants that work great in pots. I recommend starting with some basics like culinary herbs such as Greek oregano, thyme, basil, sage, and rosemary, just to name a few. If you are looking to start some medicinal herbs in pots, mints of all kind would be great, like catmint, lemon balm, peppermint, spearmint, as well as some medicinal flowers like chamomile, lavender, and calendula. If you want a fun challenge, ginger root and turmeric root are super useful medicinal herbs. There are so many options. I'll pop that big old list in the associated blog post down below. Be careful now, planting herbs can get addicting. Now that we have our herb plants picked out, it's time to decide on herb containers. Options include cheap and affordable plastic pots, terracotta pots to fancy window boxes, creative antique containers, and in between. There might be as many container options as there are plant options, just maybe. The most important part about your herb containers is the pot size. Whatever container you use needs to be big enough to support the herb plant itself. If you are planting something smaller like a basil plant, it won't need as much room as, say, a lavender or rosemary plant. If planting by seed, use the seed instructions on the spacing as your guide to how big of a pot you will need. If you are buying a plant start, hit up Mr. Google and see how big each plant tends to get. That will give you a clue on how big a pot you need. Every herb plant will have different requirements. Make sure that your container has appropriate drainage so that the water doesn't sit in the pot and drown your plant. We've got our herbs and we have our containers. Now it's time to fill them up with soil. We love using the Square Foot Garden Potting Soil Mix, or you can use Elliott Coleman's mix as well. If you don't want to mix your own potting soil, just find a good organic potting mix at your local farm store. Don't use the clay soil out of your yard or the sandy soil with the weed seed. You will want a nice, light, fluffy, high quality, clean soil with good drainage. It's time to water our new potted herb garden. Hopefully you started out with a pot or container that has great drainage, which usually comes in the form of a small hole or holes in the bottom of the container. Believe me when I say I know what happens when you don't have good drainage. Your potted herb plant will need different amounts of water based on the type of herb that you planted, as well as where the pot is located. If the pot is outside, it may need more or less water based on the weather. If the potted herb is kept inside, the environment is more predictable and the plant will likely need continued amounts of water. Eventually, your herb plant might need a little refresh since the soil is contained in a pot. A little fresh potting soil here and there might be necessary, or maybe an organic fertilizer. We love using Elliott Coleman's Organic Gardener book as a reference for finding the right soil components for what our specific herb plants need. Our new potted herb garden is pretty easy to grow, but there are a few care tips. The biggest issue I usually have is remembering to water it. I've found having a little person help me out can be super helpful in getting those potted herbs watered. Aside from that and a little trimming and pruning, with the occasional soil refresh of fertilizer should keep your potted herbs looking fabulous. When it comes time to harvest your herbs, we have some great tools that we love to use. I'll link that video above and below that includes tools for harvesting chamomile to stripping common herbs like oregano and mint. Having your own container garden of herbs is a great way to have fresh herbs at your fingertips any time of year. Not only do they have fresh flavor, but the growing season doesn't matter because you can always bring them inside the house. If you're looking for even more in-depth details on things like a printed potting soil recipe and video tutorials, make sure you check out our Herbal Studio Community. Make sure you grab the full list of the best herbs to grow in pots in the related blog post. I'll pop that link below. If you plant some herbs in pots, I'd love to see them. Send me some pictures on Instagram. Happy growing, friends! If you have any questions about growing herbs in pots, make sure to let me know. Don't forget to subscribe for more growing, creating, and sipping videos. If you enjoyed this video, you might also like this video here.